33 years ago, on the coldest Christmas morning that Montana had ever witnessed, I found a dying baby on my doorstep. The decision I made in the 10 minutes that followed changed everything. Not just my life, but the lives of everyone I would ever love. My name is Caleb Thornton. I am 68 years old now, and I have lived long enough to understand that some moments define us forever. Some choices echo through generations, and some gifts arrive in the most unexpected forms, wrapped not in paper and ribbon, but in frost and desperation and the faintest whisper of hope. This is the story of that morning. This is the story of grace. Let me take you back to December of 1886, to the Montana Territory, to a small cabin in the Bitterroot Valley, where a broken man lived with 3 children and a heart that had forgotten how to feel. That man was me. The winter of 1886 was unlike anything the American West had ever experienced. Old-timers called it the death winter. Temperatures plunged to 40 degrees below zero. Blizzards swept across the plains like the wrath of God himself. Cattle froze standing upright in the fields, their bodies becoming grotesque statues of ice and fur. Hundreds of homesteaders perished, their dreams of a new life buried beneath endless drifts of white. I had survived worse, or so I told myself. I had survived the loss of my wife Sarah 2 years earlier, watched her slip away in a pool of blood on the same bed where she had brought our children into the world. I had survived the grief that followed, the hollow months of going through motions without feeling anything at all. I had survived by shutting down every part of myself that could hurt, locking away my heart like a man boards up windows before a storm. But survival is not the same as living. And on that Christmas morning, I was barely doing either. I woke at 5, as I always did. The cabin was dark, the fire burned down to embers that glowed like dying stars in the hearth. My 3 children slept in the back room. Emma, 7 years old and already too wise for her age. Thomas, 5, quiet and watchful like his father. Jacob, just 2, the baby Sarah never got to see grow. I pulled on my boots and my heaviest coat, preparing to check on the livestock. The barn was 50 yards from the cabin, and in weather like this, 50 yards could be the distance between life and death. I had lost 2 cows already this winter. I could not afford to lose more. The cold hit me like a physical blow when I opened the door. My breath crystallized instantly, forming tiny ice crystals that sparkled in the pre-dawn darkness. The thermometer beside the door read 20 degrees below zero. Even for Montana, this was brutal. I took one step onto the porch, then another. My eyes were adjusting to the darkness when I saw it, a basket, sitting on the snow-covered boards of my porch just to the right of the door. Steam rose from beneath a woolen blanket, the warm breath of something alive meeting the frozen air. My heart stopped. For a long moment I could not move, could not think, could not do anything but stare at that impossible basket, at the steam rising like a prayer into the black sky. Then I was moving 3 strides across the porch, dropping to my knees in the snow, reaching for the blanket with hands that had suddenly begun to shake. I pulled back the wool, a baby, a newborn girl, perhaps only days old. Her lips were the color of bruises, purple and bleached against skin that had gone gray and white like ice forming on a creek. One tiny fist clutched at nothing, fingers curled against an empty palm. Her chest barely moved. Her eyes were closed. She was dying. Right there in my hands, this child was dying. God Almighty, I whispered. The words came out as vapor, stolen away by the cold. There was a scrap of paper tucked beneath the baby. I grabbed it with numb fingers, held it up to the faint light spilling from the cabin door. The writing was shaky, the letters uneven. Someone had written this in haste, or in desperation, or in both. Her name is Grace. I cannot keep her. You are a good father, that was all. No signature, no explanation, just 9 words that would reshape my entire existence. The cabin door banged open behind me. Daddy! Emma stood in the doorway, her nightgown white against the darkness. Her eyes, still heavy with sleep, found the basket in my arms, found the baby. Daddy, a baby. Thomas appeared behind her, pushing past his sister to see. Then Jacob, toddling out on bare feet that should not have been touching the frozen boards. Inside, I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. All of you inside. Now, I lifted the basket. The baby was so light, lighter than kindling, lighter than hope. I could feel how cold she was, even through the blanket, through my gloves, through everything. Her breathing was so shallow I had to watch closely to see her chest move at all. Emma held the door as I carried the basket to the hearth. Thomas stood frozen, eyes wide as coins. Jacob pointed with one chubby finger. Baby, he said. Baby cold. I set the basket on the warm hearthstones and began building up the fire. My hands moved automatically, reaching for bark and tinder, for the small pieces of wood that would catch quickly. I had done this 1,000 times before, but never like this. Never with a life depending on the speed of my movements. The fire caught. Flames licked upward, casting orange light across the room. I turned back to the basket, began unwrapping the baby as carefully as I could. Her skin was ice, not cold. Ice, the kind of cold that meant her body was shutting down, retreating from its extremities to protect the vital organs. I had seen this before in miners caught in blizzards, in drunks who fell asleep in snowbanks. The color of her skin, the sluggishness of her movements. These were the signs of severe hypothermia. She's been outside for at least 2 hours, I thought. Maybe 3. Any longer and she would already be dead. Emma crept closer. Her voice was small, barely above a whisper. Daddy, she is dying. My throat tightened. I wanted to deny it. Wanted to tell my daughter that everything would be fine, that the baby would warm up and start crying and be perfectly healthy. But Emma had seen death before. She had watched her mother die in this very cabin, had held Thomas's hand while I carried Sarah's body out for burial. She knew what dying looked like, and she was right. This baby was dying. I did not know what to do. I could build a fire, could heat water, could wrap her in blankets. But I was not a doctor. I was not even particularly good at caring for my own children. Sarah had been the one who knew about these things. Sarah had been the one who could soothe a fever, bandage a wound, coax a sick child back to health. Sarah was gone, and I was alone with a dying baby and 3 children who were looking at me like I could save the world. Then I saw movement through the window, a figure crossing the snow between my cabin and the one 200 yards to the east. Moving fast, almost running, a bag in her hands. Martha Holloway, the woman who lived alone in that cabin. The woman who helped the sick in our valley but kept to herself otherwise. The woman I barely knew, despite 2 years as neighbors. She must have seen me on the porch, must have known something was wrong. The door opened without a knock. Martha swept inside, already shedding her coat, her eyes going straight to the basket by the hearth. How long has she been out there? It was not a question, it was a demand. I do not know, I just found her. Martha dropped to her knees beside the hearth. Her hands were already reaching, already working. She picked up the baby, felt her neck, her chest, pressed her ear to the tiny rib cage. Her face was grim when she looked up. Severe hypothermia, stage 2, possibly stage 3. Her pulse is around 70 beats per minute. It should be 120 or higher. She needs warm water, not hot, just warm. More blankets. And prayer. I was already moving, filling the kettle, pulling blankets from the chest in the corner. My children watched from across the room, Emma with her arms around Thomas, Jacob in her lap. They had become statues, frozen by the gravity of what was happening. Martha worked without speaking. She stripped the baby's frozen clothes away, wrapped her in a blanket that had been warmed by the fire. She tested the water I brought by dipping her elbow in it, an old nurse's trick that Sarah had used. Who are you? I asked. How do you know how to do this? Martha did not look up. Her hands kept moving, kept working. I was an army nurse. Bull Run, Antietam, Gettysburg. She spoke the names like they were wounds that had never fully healed. I have seen more people die of cold than you can imagine. Now be quiet and let me work. I stepped back. There was nothing else I could do. The next 2 hours were the longest of my life. Martha worked with the precision of someone who had done this before many times in circumstances far worse than a cabin with a warm fire. She used the heated water to dampen cloths, which she pressed against the baby's skin. She held Grace against her own chest, sharing body heat in the most direct way possible. She checked the tiny pulse at the baby's throat every few minutes, counting silently, her lips moving. My children did not move, did not speak. They understood, in the way that children who have experienced loss understand, that this was a moment balanced on a knife's edge. I paced, I watched, I prayed, though I had not spoken to God since the day Sarah died. Please, I whispered, please let her live. The baby's lips were still blue. Her skin was still gray and white, but her breathing seemed stronger. Her tiny fists unclenched, then clenched again. And then, just as the first light of Christmas dawn began to seep through the frost-covered windows, Grace cried. It was not a strong cry. It was thin and reedy, barely louder than a whisper. But it was a cry. It was life, asserting itself against the cold and the darkness and all the forces that had tried to snuff it out. Emma gasped. Thomas grinned for the first time in days. Jacob clapped his hands. Baby crying, he announced. Baby not dead. Martha's shoulders sagged. The tension drained out of her like water from a cracked vessel. She looked up at me, and I saw exhaustion in her eyes. But I saw something else too, something fierce and protective, like a mother wolf standing over her cubs. She will live, Martha said. Martha. But she needs constant care, feeding every 2 hours, warming, watching. She met my eyes. Do you understand what that means? I looked at my 3 children, clustered together across the room. I looked at the tiny baby in Martha's arms, the baby who had appeared on my doorstep like a gift I had not asked for and was not sure I could accept. I was already exhausted, already stretched thinner than old rope. I was behind on my mortgage payments, worried about losing the ranch, barely keeping my children fed and clothed and warm. I could not take on another child. But the note was still on the mantel, those 9 words written in a desperate hand. You are a good father. Whoever had left this baby believed that about me. They had trusted me with their child's life, had placed their hope in a stranger because they had no other choice. Could I turn away from that? I understand, I said. Martha's expression softened slightly. I will help. She hesitated. Until the sheriff finds her mother. Just until then. We both knew that was a lie. No one leaves a baby in the snow on Christmas morning unless they are desperate beyond measure. Or gone for good. Boots sounded on the porch. A knock, and then Sheriff Henry Garrett stepped inside without waiting for an answer. He was a weathered man, 58 years old, with a gray beard and eyes that had seen too much of the darkness that men carry within them. Heard you found something this morning, he said. I handed him the note. Garrett read it twice, his eyes moving slowly over each word. Then he looked at the baby, still cradled in Martha's arms. Then at me. Any idea who left her? No. See anything unusual last night? We were all asleep. Garrett folded the note carefully, tucking it into his coat pocket. I will ask around. But Caleb, he paused, choosing his words. It is Christmas morning. It is 20 below zero. Whoever left this baby made a choice. They knew she would not survive long out there. They were trusting you specifically. How do you know that? Because they left her on your porch, not mine, not the preacher's, yours. Garrett settled his hat back onto his head. I will do what I can, but do not expect much. He turned to leave, then stopped. His voice dropped low, meant only for my ears. There is something else you should know. Ezra Blackwood came to see me yesterday. He says your loan is past due. I felt the blood drain from my face. I have 2 months left. He has paperwork that says different. Garrett shook his head. I am not a lawyer, Caleb. I am just warning you. Then he was gone, his footsteps crunching away through the snow. The cabin fell silent again. I stood by the fire, my mind racing. Ezra Blackwood, the banker who owned half the valley, who had grown rich by buying up the land of desperate farmers and struggling ranchers. I had borrowed $200 from him 2 years ago, money I needed for Sarah's medical care and funeral, for seeds and supplies to get through that first terrible winter without her. I'd been paying it back, month by month, dollar by dollar. But this winter had been brutal. The cattle were dying, the crops had failed. I had fallen behind, and now Blackwood was circling like a vulture over a dying animal. If I lost the ranch, I lost everything. The land Sarah and I had built together. The home where my children had been born. The grave on the hillside where Sarah slept. I could not let that happen. Martha's voice broke through my thoughts. What was that about? Nothing, I said. It was a lie, and she probably knew it. But she did not push. Instead, she settled into the old rocking chair by the fire. Sarah's chair, the chair that had sat empty for 2 years because I could not bear to see anyone else sitting in it. Martha did not know that. She simply sat, holding Grace, rocking gently as the baby drifted into sleep. The chair creaked softly, a sound I had almost forgotten, a sound that belonged to another time, another life when Sarah would sit in that same spot and hum lullabies to our children. I should have told Martha to move, should have explained why that chair was sacred, why no one else should ever sit in it. But I did not. I just watched. Watched this stranger holding a baby that was not hers, sitting in my dead wife's chair, looking more at home in my cabin than I had felt in 2 years. Emma approached slowly, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. "What is her name?" she asked. "Grace," I said. "The note said her name is Grace." "Like in church," Thomas offered from across the room. "Grace means something good is coming." Martha looked down at the sleeping infant in her arms. A small smile crossed her face, but it was tinged with sadness. "Yes," she said quietly, "something good." But her eyes told a different story. There was pain there, old pain, deep and well hidden. I wondered what she was thinking, wondered what had brought a woman with no children of her own to live alone in a cabin, helping everyone else raise theirs. "I will stay tonight," Martha said. "She needs watching." I wanted to refuse, wanted to say I could manage on my own, that I did not need help from anyone. Pride was about all I had left, but I looked at Grace's tiny face, at the color slowly returning to her cheeks, and I knew the truth. I could not do this alone. I could barely keep my own children alive. Adding a newborn baby to the mix, a baby who needed constant care, who had nearly died of exposure just hours ago. I needed help. "Thank you," I said instead. The words felt strange in my mouth. I had not said them to anyone in a very long time. Martha settled deeper into the rocking chair. The firelight caught her profile. Strong nose, firm jaw, dark hair pulled back in a simple knot. She was not a young woman anymore. Neither was I a young man. We were both survivors of harder years, people who had been broken and put back together with pieces missing. "Just until we find her mother," Martha said again. Outside, the snow began to fall once more, soft and steady, covering tracks, covering secrets, covering everything. I did not know then what the coming weeks would bring. I did not know about the battles I would have to fight, about the choices I would have to make. I did not know that this strange woman in my wife's rocking chair would become more important to me than I could imagine. I did not know that a baby named Grace would teach me how to feel again. All I knew in that moment was that something had changed. The door I had kept locked for 2 years was opening, whether I was ready or not. The morning passed slowly. Martha taught Emma how to prepare the milk mixture for Grace. Cow's milk diluted with boiled water, cooled to body temperature. A half teaspoon of honey for energy and digestion. Fed through a glass bottle with a rubber nipple, a relatively new invention that Martha had seen used in hospitals back east. I watched as my daughter absorbed every detail with fierce concentration. Emma had always been serious, even before Sarah died. Now she approached the care of this baby like it was a sacred duty, like she was personally responsible for keeping Grace alive. In a way, perhaps she was. We all were. Thomas stayed in the background, watchful and quiet. He did not ask questions like his sister. He simply observed, taking everything in with those dark eyes that reminded me so much of his mother. Jacob was the only one who seemed unaffected by the gravity of the situation. He toddled around the cabin, occasionally pointing at the baby and declaring "baby sleeping" or "baby eating" with great satisfaction. To him, Grace was simply another member of the household, no different from the chickens or the cow. By midday, Grace was feeding well. Her color had improved dramatically. The blue had faded from her lips, replaced by a healthy pink. Her movements were stronger, more purposeful. When Martha placed her in my arms for a moment, the baby's eyes opened and looked up at me. They were the deepest blue I had ever seen, like the sky on a clear winter day. She looked at me as if she knew me, as if she had been waiting her whole short life to find me. Something shifted in my chest, a crack in the ice that had formed around my heart. I pushed the feeling away, handed the baby back to Martha, and went outside to check on the livestock. The barn was cold but dry. The two surviving cows were huddled together for warmth, their breath forming clouds of vapor in the frigid air. I forked hay into their trough, checked their water, ran my hands over their flanks to feel for any signs of sickness. These animals were all that stood between my family and starvation. If they died, we would have no milk, no way to make butter or cheese. We would have nothing to trade at the general store, nothing to see us through until spring. I thought about Blackwood's claim that my loan was past due. If it was true, if he had somehow changed the terms without my knowledge, I would have no way to fight back. I had no money for lawyers, no powerful friends to speak on my behalf. I was just a widower with 3 children in a dying ranch, an easy target for a man like Ezra Blackwood. But that was a problem for another day. Right now, I had a baby to keep alive, and a stranger in my house, and a Christmas dinner to somehow provide for my children. I gathered eggs from the chicken coop. 3 hens had survived the winter so far, and they were still laying, though not as frequently as in warmer months. I found 4 eggs, enough for a simple breakfast. It was not the Christmas feast Sarah would have prepared, but it was something. When I returned to the cabin, the scene that greeted me stopped me in my tracks. Martha was sitting in the rocking chair with Grace in her arms, just as before. But now my 3 children had gathered around her. Emma sat on the floor at her feet, looking up with an expression of rapt attention. Thomas had brought his wooden horse, the one I had carved for him last Christmas, and was showing it to Martha with unusual animation. And Jacob had somehow climbed into her lap, wedging himself between Martha and the baby, his thumb in his mouth and his eyes already drooping toward sleep. They looked like a family. The thought hit me like a blow to the chest. They looked like mother and children. They looked like the scene I used to see every evening when I came in from work. Sarah surrounded by our babies, all of them warm and safe and loved. Martha caught my eye. For a moment, something passed between us. Recognition, perhaps, or understanding. She knew what I was seeing. She knew what it meant. Then Jacob yawned loudly, breaking the spell, and the moment passed. "I have eggs," I said, "and some bacon left over from last week. Not much of a Christmas dinner, but it is something." Martha nodded. "I will help cook, if you can hold her for a few minutes." She held Grace out toward me. I hesitated. Cooking was something I could do, had learned to do out of necessity after Sarah died. But holding a baby, feeding a baby, caring for a baby in all the ways that babies need to be cared for, that was different. That was dangerous. That was the kind of thing that could crack open a heart and leave it bleeding. But Martha was waiting and my children were watching, and there was no way to refuse without explaining things I did not have words for. I took the baby. Grace was warm now, her tiny body radiating heat like a small sun. She squirmed slightly as she settled into my arms, then relaxed, her eyes closing again. One small fist found my finger and held on. "She is strong," Martha said. "After what she went through, most babies would not have survived. But she is a fighter." I looked down at the infant in my arms, at the wisps of fair hair on her scalp, at the curve of her cheek, the button of her nose. She had appeared on my doorstep like something out of a fairy tale, a foundling, a changeling, a gift from the universe to a man who had stopped believing in gifts. "What am I going to do with you?" I murmured. The words were not meant for anyone else to hear. But Emma heard anyway. She looked up at me with those old wise eyes of hers. "We are going to keep her," she said. It was not a question. "Are we not, Daddy?" I did not answer. I did not know how to answer. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that nothing in this life is permanent, that people come and go, that loving someone is the surest way to lose them? But Emma did not need an explanation. She had already decided. In her mind, Grace was ours now. One more member of our strange, broken, beautiful family. Martha cooked while I held the baby. Bacon sizzled in the pan, eggs cracked and popped. The smell filled the cabin, mixing with the wood smoke and the faint scent of the pine branches Emma had brought in yesterday to decorate for Christmas. It was not much of a celebration. We had no presents, no tree, no extended family gathering around a laden table. But we had food and warmth and each other. And we had Grace alive and breathing and hungry. When she began to fuss, Martha showed me how to hold the bottle. "Tilt it just so," she instructed. Let her set the pace. If she stops, do not force her. She will let you know when she is done. The baby latched onto the nipple and began to suck. Her tiny throat worked as she swallowed, her eyes fixed on my face with that unnerving intensity. She knows you, Martha said quietly. She has decided you are safe. I did not feel safe. I felt like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, feeling the ground crumble beneath his feet. Every moment with this baby, every feeding and every cry, and every time she looked at me with those blue eyes, it was pulling me back from the numbness I had wrapped around myself like armor. It was making me feel things I had sworn never to feel again. After we ate, I put the children down for their afternoon nap. Even Emma did not protest, exhausted from the morning's events. Within minutes, all three were asleep, their breathing soft and even in the quiet cabin. Martha sat by the fire with Grace. I sat across from her, not knowing what to say, not knowing if there was anything to say. It was Martha who finally broke the silence. I lost my husband 3 years ago. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. Matthew, a riding accident. His horse spooked, threw him. He hit his head on a rock. I am sorry, I said. The words felt inadequate. We had been married for 10 years. Martha continued as if I had not spoken. 10 years of trying to have children. 10 years of hoping and praying and watching other women's bellies grow while mine stayed flat. She paused. After Matthew died, I went to see a doctor in St. Louis. He told me the grief had done something to my body, that I would never be able to have children of my own. I did not know what to say. What could anyone say to that kind of loss? I came here to be alone, Martha continued, to help other people with their families since I could not have one of my own. She looked down at Grace and her voice caught. I thought my chance was gone forever. And then she did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. I understood in that moment why she had come running through the snow, why she had fought so hard to save a baby that was not hers, why she was sitting in my dead wife's chair with such perfect ease. Grace was not just a baby to her. Grace was possibility. Grace was a second chance that she had never expected to receive. And maybe, I thought, Grace was the same thing for me. The day wore on, the light faded, the fire burned low, and I built it back up. Grace slept and woke and fed and slept again, her rhythms slowly becoming familiar. As evening fell, Martha prepared to settle in for the night. She had made a bed for herself near the hearth, blankets piled on the floor within arm's reach of the baby's basket. You should take the bed, I said. I can sleep out here. No, Martha shook her head. Grace needs to be near the fire, and I need to be near Grace. You have your own children to care for. It was practical, logical, and yet it felt wrong somehow to have this woman sleeping on my floor while I slept in a proper bed. But I was too tired to argue. The day had wrung everything out of me. I checked on my children one more time, found them all sleeping peacefully, and retreated to my room. Sleep did not come easily. I lay in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the cabin, the creak of Martha's movements as she tended to Grace, the soft cry of the baby quickly soothed, the wind howling outside, pushing against the walls like a living thing. I thought about Sarah, about the note on the mantel, about Blackwood and his claims about my loan. I thought about what it would mean to keep this baby, another mouth to feed, another body to clothe, another heart to protect. I thought about what it would mean to give her up, and somewhere in the middle of all that thinking, I fell asleep. I dreamed of Sarah, not the Sarah who had died, pale and still on a blood-soaked bed, the Sarah I had married, the Sarah who had laughed at my jokes and danced with me in the kitchen and believed in me even when I did not believe in myself. She was standing in a field of wildflowers, the way she had been on our wedding day. The sun was behind her, turning her hair to gold. She spoke, but I could not hear the words. The wind was too loud, or maybe I was too far away. I reached for her. My fingers closed on empty air, and then I woke up. The cabin was dark. The fire had burned down to embers, but there was a sound, a soft sound that had pulled me from sleep. Martha was crying. I lay still, listening. She was trying to be quiet about it, muffling the sounds in her sleeve or her blanket. But in the silence of the cabin, every sob was audible. I should have pretended not to hear, should have turned over and gone back to sleep given her the privacy of her grief. Instead, I got up. She did not hear me approach. She was sitting in the rocking chair, Grace asleep in the basket at her feet, her face buried in her hands. Her shoulders shook with the force of her weeping. I did not say anything. I just stood there a few feet away, close enough that she could feel my presence. After a long moment, she looked up. Her face was wet, her eyes red and swollen. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I did not mean to wake you. You did not." We looked at each other in the dim light. Two broken people brought together by a baby neither of us had expected to find. I sat down across from her. The fire was almost out, but I did not move to rebuild it. The darkness felt appropriate, somehow, like a confessional where secrets could be shared without fear. "Why are you crying?" I asked. Martha wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Because I am happy," she said, "and I do not know what to do with that. I have been sad for so long. I have forgotten what it feels like to hope for something." I understood. God help me, I understood exactly what she meant. "Sarah told me something once," I said. The words came slowly, dragged up from a place I had kept locked away. "She said that love is not about avoiding pain. It is about choosing to feel it anyway. Choosing to be brave even when you are afraid." Martha was silent for a long moment. "Your wife sounds like she was a wise woman." She was. I swallowed against the lump in my throat. She was the best person I ever knew. And when she did, I locked all of it away. The love, the hope, the courage. I locked it away because I could not bear to feel it anymore. And now I looked at the basket where Grace slept, at the woman sitting across from me, her face wet with tears but her eyes bright with something that might have been hope. "Now I do not know," I admitted. "Everything is different now. I am not sure I remember how to feel anything." Martha reached out and touched my hand. Her fingers were warm against my skin. "Maybe," she said softly, "we can learn together." We sat like that until the fire died completely and the cold began to creep in. Then I rebuilt the fire and Martha settled back into her blankets, and we did not speak again that night. But something had changed between us. Some wall had come down. Some barrier had been breached. I did not know yet where it would lead. Did not know about the battles we would gain, the enemies who would try to tear us apart, the choices we would have to make. All I knew was that for the first time in 2 years, I did not feel completely alone. And that was enough. For now, that was enough. The door I had kept locked was opening, and through it, like light through a crack, hope was beginning to seep in. The days after Christmas blurred together like watercolors bleeding into one another. 3 days became a week. Martha did not return to her cabin. She slept in the rocking chair at first, Grace cradled against her chest, waking every 2 hours to feed and change and soothe. Then she began sleeping through the night in a corner of the main room on a small bed I assembled from spare boards and old blankets. We did not discuss the arrangement. It simply happened, the way snow accumulates on a roof. One flake at a time, until suddenly there is a weight that cannot be ignored. My children attached themselves to Martha like burrs to wool. Emma followed her everywhere, asking questions about everything. "How do you know when the milk is warm enough? Why does Grace cry when her diaper is wet? What do you do if she will not stop fussing?" The questions poured out of my daughter in an endless stream, and Martha answered each one with patience and care. Thomas expressed his affection differently. He was not a talker, my middle child. He was a doer, a maker, a boy who communicated through actions rather than words. Each morning I would find small treasures beside Martha's bed: a smooth river stone polished by years of flowing water, a carved wooden horse no bigger than my thumb, a perfect pine cone, a blue feather from a mountain jay. He never said anything about these gifts. He would simply leave them and walk away, his face carefully blank. But Martha understood. She kept every single item, arranging them on the windowsill where they caught the morning light. Jacob was the boldest of my children. At 2 years old, he had not yet learned the caution that comes with experience. He would climb into Martha's lap without asking, wedging himself between her and the baby, patting Grace's head with clumsy affection. "Baby mine," he would announce. "Martha, mine." The possessive declarations made Martha laugh, a sound I had not heard from her before. It was a good sound, warm and real and full of something that might have been joy. I watched all of this from a distance, watched my children bloom under Martha's attention like flowers turning toward the sun, watched the cabin transform from a place of mere survival into something that felt almost like a home, and I felt something crack open in my chest, something that had been frozen since the day Sarah died. I had loved my wife deeply and truly. She had been light and laughter, quick to sing and quick to forgive. When she died, bringing Jacob into the world, something in me had shut down. I had locked the grief away, focused only on keeping my children alive and warm and fed. I had become a machine, going through the motions of living without actually being alive. But now Martha moved through my cabin with quiet competence, and I could not help but notice things. The way Emma's eyes followed her, the way Thomas smiled more often, the way Jacob laughed again, really laughed, the way he had not laughed since before his mother died, the way Grace thrived in Martha's arms. One evening, after the children had gone to sleep, I found myself standing outside Sarah's old sewing room. The door had been locked for 2 years. I had not been able to bear seeing the half-finished quilts, the tiny clothes she had sewn for the baby she would never hold. I took the key from my pocket. My hands trembled as I fitted it into the lock. The door swung open. Moonlight fell through the window onto the cradle I had made with my own hands. Oak and walnut, fitted together with care. I had carved a star into the headboard because Sarah loved stars. She said they were God's way of reminding us that there is always light, even in the darkest night. She had never gotten to use this cradle. Jacob had slept in the old one, the one that had held Emma and Thomas before him. This cradle, the one I had made especially for our fourth child, had sat empty in this room for 2 years. I lifted it. The wood was smooth under my fingers, still smelling faintly of the oil I had used to finish it. I carried it out to the main room and set it beside the fire. Martha looked up from the rocking chair. Her eyes went to the cradle, then to my face. "This was Sarah's," I said. My voice caught on my wife's name, for Jacob, but she never. I could not finish the sentence. Martha nodded. She understood. She always seemed to understand. She rose carefully, Grace sleeping against her shoulder, and lowered the baby into the cradle with infinite gentleness. Grace stirred, made a small sound of contentment, and settled into sleep. One tiny fist curled against her cheek. I watched Martha's face as she looked down at the baby. There was tenderness there, and longing, a longing so deep it hurt to witness. "You never had children." I said it as a statement, not a question. I already knew the answer. "No," Martha's voice was barely above a whisper. "My husband and I tried for 10 years. Then he died." "After that," the doctor said. She stopped, swallowed. "It does not matter now. I am sorry. So am I." She looked at Grace, her expression softening. I thought my chance was gone forever. Then this. I wanted to say something, wanted to tell her that she was good with my children, that they needed her, that maybe I needed her too, but the words stuck in my throat. Loving again meant risking again. It meant opening myself to the possibility of more loss. I was not sure I was strong enough for that. Martha seemed to sense my struggle. She moved past me, heading for the door. "I should go back to my cabin tonight. You will be fine now. You know what to do." "Martha." She paused, her hand on the latch. "Thank you," I said, "for everything." She nodded, stepped out into the snow. I watched through the window as she crossed to her own cabin, watched until her lamp lit in the darkness. Then I turned back to the cradle. Grace slept peacefully, her color good, her breathing steady. She had survived because Martha had saved her. Maybe we were all surviving because of Martha. I sank into the rocking chair. It still held her warmth. The thought disturbed me, comforted me, both at once. Outside, the snow fell soft and steady. Inside, the fire burned low. And in the cradle that Sarah had never used, a baby named Grace slept safe and sound. The door I had kept closed for 2 years was opening, whether I was ready or not. January brought bitter cold that seemed to seep through the walls of the cabin no matter how high I built the fire. The temperature dropped to 30 below zero some nights, so cold that the water in the wash basin would freeze solid by morning. Martha did not go back to her cabin. After that first night when she tried to leave, something unspoken passed between us. An understanding, a recognition that what was happening here was bigger than either of us. She moved her things into the sewing room. The small bed there had been Sarah's when she needed quiet during her pregnancies. Now it belonged to Martha. The household found a rhythm. Martha rose before dawn, stirred the fire, warmed milk for Grace. I handled the trap line and the wood cutting. Emma helped with cooking and laundry. Thomas fetched water from the well and fed the chickens. Even Jacob had his tasks, gathering kindling and folding cloths and other small jobs that made him feel important. We moved around each other's like parts of a well-oiled machine, efficient, careful, but something hummed beneath the surface, something unspoken. I would reach for the coffee pot and find Martha already pouring my cup. She would turn to check on the children and discover I had already settled Jacob for his nap. Our hands would brush passing plates at dinner. Our eyes would meet across the fire at night. Neither of us acknowledged it. Both of us felt it. The community noticed too. The first Sunday of January, I took the family to church. It was a decision I wrestled with for days. We had not attended services since before Christmas, and I knew our absence had been noted. In a small community like Millbrook, everything was noted. But I also knew that appearing in public with Martha would set tongues wagging. A widow woman living in the home of a widower man with 4 children between them. It did not matter that our arrangement was innocent. It did not matter that Martha slept in her own room, that nothing improper had ever occurred. People would talk. People always talked. Still, we could not hide forever, and Grace needed to be baptized, needed to be officially welcomed into the community and the faith. So we bundled everyone in coats and scarves. Martha fashioned a sling for Grace, wearing the baby against her chest for warmth. Emma held Thomas's hand. I carried Jacob on my shoulders. We looked like a family. I realized it as we walked, realized how we must appear to anyone watching. Man, woman, 4 children. Complete. The thought should have frightened me. Instead, it felt right. The town was busy despite the cold. People called greetings as we passed. Mrs. Jameson from the general store cooed over Grace. The blacksmith tipped his hat to Martha. Everyone was friendly, curious, knowing. Then Widow Morrison appeared. She was a woman of 62 years with a tongue as sharp as a freshly stropped razor. She had buried 3 husbands and outlived all of her children, and she filled the emptiness of her life by meddling in everyone else's affairs. Nothing happened in Millbrook without Widow Morrison knowing about it, commenting on it, and sharing her opinion with anyone who would listen. She blocked our path just outside the church doors, her black dress rustling like dead leaves in the wind. "I hear you are living in the Thornton cabin now, Miss Holloway." Her voice carried, deliberately loud enough for the gathering congregation to hear. A single woman in the home of a widower with children. How very interesting. Martha's spine stiffened. I saw her jaw tighten, saw the flash of something dangerous in her eyes. "I am caring for an infant who nearly died, Mrs. Morrison." Her voice was cold as the January air. "If you find Christian charity interesting, perhaps you should examine your own definition of the word." Widow Morrison's eyes narrowed. "I am sure your intentions are pure." The emphasis on the word was unmistakable. But intentions are not always enough. There are proprieties to consider, standards to maintain. The standards I maintain are my own. Martha stepped forward, and something in her bearing made the older woman take a half step back. I survived 3 years as an army nurse. I held dying men in my arms while their blood soaked through my dress. I have seen things that would make your nightmares seem pleasant. So please do not lecture me about propriety. She swept past Widow Morrison and into the church, leaving the old woman gaping like a fish pulled from water. I followed, trying to hide my smile. The service was long and cold, the church barely warmer than the outside air. But Pastor Hayes spoke about new beginnings and second chances, about the gifts that God sends us when we least expect them. I found myself listening more closely than I had in years. Afterward, as we filed out into the pale winter sunlight, a man I had been hoping to avoid stepped into my path. Ezra Blackwood. He was 52 years old, dressed in a suit that cost more than most families in Millbrook earned in a year. His silver-headed cane gleamed in the light. His smile did not reach his eyes. Thornton. His voice was smooth as honey, sweet and sticky, and somehow threatening. I heard about the baby. How touching. I kept my face neutral. "What do you want, Blackwood?" "Want." He spread his hands as if the idea of wanting anything was foreign to him. I want nothing but the best for my neighbors. I understand you are having some financial difficulties. The mortgage payment you missed, I did not miss a payment. His smile widened. I have paperwork that suggests otherwise. But let us not discuss business on the Sabbath. I simply wanted you to know that if you find yourself in need of assistance, I am prepared to make a fair offer for your property. My property is not for sale. Everything is for sale, Thornton. The mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and hungry beneath, especially when winter stretches on and the money runs out. He tipped his hat to Martha, a gesture of courtesy that somehow felt like a threat. Give my regards to your lovely family. Then he walked away, his cane clicking against the frozen ground. I stood there, my hands clenched at my sides, watching him disappear into the crowd. What was that about? Martha's voice was quiet, meant only for my ears. I shook my head. Later. But later never seemed to come. There was always something else, always another task, always another demand on my time and attention. The livestock needed tending. The children needed feeding. Grace needed her constant cycle of care. And beneath it all, the threat of Blackwood hung like a storm cloud on the horizon. It was Sheriff Garrett who finally told me the full truth. He came by the cabin a week after that Sunday confrontation, bringing news about the investigation into Grace's origins. I have been asking around. He sat at the kitchen table, his hat in his hands, his weathered face grave. There was a young woman working at the Patterson Hotel, arrived in town about 2 months ago, heavily pregnant. No husband. Rebecca Shaw. I did not recognize the name. Garrett continued. She gave birth around Christmas. No one was there to help her. The baby came early and there were complications. She had no milk, no money, no way to care for an infant. What happened to her? She disappeared the day after Christmas. Mrs. Patterson says she just vanished. Left her wages behind, left everything. Garrett met my eyes. I think she is the one who left Grace on your porch. And I think she is either dead somewhere out in that snow, or she has run so far, we will never find her. The words settled over me like a blanket of ice. What does this mean for Grace? It means that unless someone comes forward to claim her, she is yours. Legally speaking, the territory allows for informal adoption when a child is abandoned. You would need to file paperwork with the circuit judge when he comes through in the spring. But until then, he shrugged, she is your responsibility. I looked across the room to where Martha sat with Grace in the rocking chair. The baby was awake, her blue eyes tracking the movement of Martha's hand as she waved a cloth doll. There is something else, Garrett's voice dropped. About Blackwood, I turned back to him. I have been doing some digging. In the past 5 years, Blackwood has acquired 12 properties in this valley. Every single one of them came from owners who suddenly found themselves in debt they could not pay. Loans that came due earlier than expected, paperwork that mysteriously changed. Are you saying he is a crook? I am saying that 12 coincidences is a pattern. Garrett pulled a folded paper from his pocket and slid it across the table. I got a look at your loan documents. The due date listed is February 15th, not April 15th like you believe. That is not right. I signed those papers myself. The due date was April. Maybe it was. Maybe someone changed it afterward. Garrett stood up. I am not a lawyer, Thornton. I cannot prove anything. But if you could get an expert to examine those documents, to compare the ink and the handwriting, where would I find someone like that? Helena, there are document examiners there, people who specialize in detecting forgeries. Garrett put his hat back on, but it would cost money, probably $40 or $50, and time. Time you may not have. After he left, I sat alone at the table for a long while, staring at the paper in my hands. If Blackwood had forged my loan documents, I might be able to fight back, might be able to save the ranch. But doing so would require resources I did not have. $40, it might as well have been $4,000. Martha appeared beside me, her hand coming to rest on my shoulder. Tell me. So I told her, but all of it. The loan, the threat, Blackwood's systematic theft of properties throughout the valley, the impossible choice between fighting back and simply trying to survive. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something I did not expect. I have money. What? Not much. $43 saved over the past 3 years. It was going to be my emergency fund. She looked at me with those steady brown eyes. But this seems like an emergency. I cannot take your money. Why not? Because it is yours. Because you might need it. Because I trailed off. I did not know how to explain it. The pride, the shame, the desperate need to solve my own problems without help from anyone. Martha sat down across from me. Caleb. Her voice was gentle but firm. When I came to your door on Christmas morning, did you turn me away? That was different. How? You had a dying baby in your arms and no idea what to do. You needed help. You accepted it. She reached out and took my hand. This is no different. We are in this together now. Your fight is my fight. I looked at our joined hands. Her fingers were strong and capable, the hands of a woman who had worked hard her whole life. Why, I asked, why do you care what happens to me? To us. Martha was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. Because for the first time in 3 years, I feel like I belong somewhere. Because your children look at me like I matter. Because. She took a breath. Because when I hold Grace in my arms, I feel like maybe God did not forget about me after all. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I know we have not known each other long. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this is foolish. But I cannot watch you lose everything without trying to help. I just cannot. I squeezed her hand. Thank you. It was not enough. 2 simple words could not convey what I was feeling in that moment. The gratitude, the fear, the strange, fragile hope that was beginning to grow in the ruins of my heart. But it was all I had. That night, I dreamed of Sarah again. We were standing on the porch of our cabin, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink. She was healthy and whole, the way she had been before the pregnancies took their toll. Her hand was warm in mine. She turned to look at me, and her eyes were full of love. You are going to be all right, Caleb. Her voice was like music, like the memory of summer. You just have to let myself what? She smiled. Feel, hope, love again. I cannot. The words caught in my throat. I lost you. I cannot go through that again. Sarah reached up and touched my face. Her fingers were soft against my cheek. I am not asking you to forget me. I am asking you to live. Really live. Not just survive. I do not know how. Yes, you do. She looked past me, toward the cabin, toward the woman who waited inside, caring for my children. She has already shown you the way. I woke with tears on my face. The cabin was quiet. Dawn had not yet broken. But through the window, I could see a faint lightning in the eastern sky. I lay there for a long time, thinking about Sarah's words, about Martha, about the choice that lay before me. For 2 years, I had been a ghost, going through the motions of life without actually living, keeping everyone at a distance, protecting myself from the pain of loss by refusing to feel anything at all. But that was not really living. That was just a slower kind of dying. Maybe it was time to try something different. I got up and went to the main room. The fire had burned low, and I knelt to rebuild it. The familiar motions were soothing, kindling first, then larger pieces of wood, then the careful arrangement of logs that would burn for hours. Martha emerged from the sewing room, drawn by the sounds of my movement. Grace was cradled against her shoulder, still half asleep. You are up early. Could not sleep. She came to sit beside me by the hearth. The firelight played across her face, softening her features, making her look younger than her years. What are you thinking about? She asked. I was quiet for a moment. Then I said something I had not planned to say. I dreamed about Sarah. Martha did not respond. She just waited, giving me space to continue. She told me to live, really live, not just survive. I stared into the flames. I'm not sure I know how to do that anymore. Martha shifted Grace to her other shoulder. Maybe you do not have to know. Maybe you just have to try. I looked at her. At this woman who had come into my life like a storm, unexpected and overwhelming, who had saved Grace and in doing so had begun to save me too. Will you help me? The words came out before I could stop them. I do not want to do this alone anymore. Martha reached out and took my hand. You are not alone. You have not been alone since Christmas morning. We sat there together as the sun rose, watching the light creep across the floor. Grace made small sounds in her sleep. Somewhere in the back of the cabin, I heard Jacob stirring. It was a moment of peace, a moment of possibility, but the peace would not last. It never does. 3 days later, I came home from checking the trap line to find the fence on the eastern boundary of my property destroyed. 20 head of cattle had wandered off into the woods during the night. It took me 3 days to track them down. I found 15. The other 5 had frozen to death in a ravine. When I examined the fence, I found what I had expected to find. The rails had not broken naturally. They had been cut clean through with a saw. Someone had deliberately destroyed my fence. I did not need to guess who. I rode into town that afternoon, my blood running hot despite the freezing temperatures. Blackwood's office was a neat brick building on the main street, a monument to his wealth in a town of wooden structures and dirt roads. I did not bother to knock. Blackwood sat behind a massive desk of polished mahogany. He looked up as I entered, his expression one of mild surprise. "Thornton, what an unexpected pleasure. I know what you did." He leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I am afraid I do not know what you are referring to. My fence, my cattle." I slammed my hands down on his desk. "5 animals dead because of you." Blackwood's smile did not waver. "That is a serious accusation. Do you have any proof?" "I have the cut marks on my fence rails. Wood can break in many ways during a hard winter." He spread his hands. "Perhaps a heavy snow load caused the damage. Perhaps wild animals. Perhaps your own livestock pushed through a weak point. They were cut, sawed clean through." Blackwood shrugged. "I am sorry for your losses, Thornton. Truly, but I fail to see what they have to do with me." I leaned across the desk, close enough to see the cold calculation in his eyes. "I know you are trying to force me off my land. I know you have done the same thing to a dozen other families in this valley." "Careful." Something flickered in Blackwood's expression. "That sounds like slander. It is not slander if it is true." For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then Blackwood leaned forward, dropping his voice to barely above a whisper. "Let me explain something to you, Thornton. I am a patient man. I have been building my holdings in this valley for 15 years, one property at a time, one family at a time. Some sell willingly, others need more persuasion. You admit it. I admit nothing." He smiled again, and this time there was nothing pleasant about it. "I am simply observing that winter is hard, that accidents happen, that a man with 3 children and a sick baby and no wife to help him might find it very difficult to hold on to his property. Leave my family out of this. Your family became my concern the moment you decided to defy me." Blackwood stood up, straightening his impeccable coat. "I offered you a fair price for your land. You refused. Now we do things the hard way. What is that supposed to mean? It means you have until February 15th to pay your debt in full or surrender your property. After that," he shrugged. "Well, let us just say I have ways of encouraging compliance. If anything happens to my family, I am not threatening anyone, Thornton. I am simply stating facts." Blackwood moved toward the door. "Winter is dangerous. People die. Property is destroyed. Things happen." He opened the door, gesturing for me to leave. "But of course, I would never wish any of that on you. I am a businessman, not a monster." I wanted to hit him, wanted to knock that smug smile off his face and beat him bloody on the floor of his fancy office. But I knew that was what he wanted, knew that if I laid a hand on him, he would have me arrested, thrown in jail, unable to protect my family or fight for my land. So I walked out. My hands shook with barely contained rage as I mounted my horse and rode back toward the cabin. The battle had been joined, and I was badly outmatched. That night, I told Martha everything. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the children asleep, the fire burning low. I told her about the cut fence, about the confrontation with Blackwood, about his thinly veiled threats. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small cloth bag. She untied the drawstring and emptied the contents onto the table. Coins, paper money, more than I had expected. $43, she said. Everything I have saved. It is not enough for a lawyer, but it is enough for the document examiner in Helena. if we can prove Blackwood forged your loan papers. Martha, let me finish. Her voice was firm. Sheriff Garrett said that if you could prove forgery, he would have grounds to investigate Blackwood. This is not just about your land anymore, Caleb. It is about all the people he has cheated, all the families he has destroyed. I looked at the money on the table. Then I looked at Martha. Why are you doing this? Because it is right. Because someone has to stand up to men like Blackwood. And because, she paused, because this is my home now too, yours and the children's and Grace's. I will not let him take it without a fight. Something shifted in my chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. We will go to Helena together, I said, after the worst of the winter passes. We will find this document examiner and get the proof we need. Martha nodded. Together. It was a small word, but it carried the weight of something much larger. Later that night, as I lay in bed listening to the wind howl outside, I thought about what Martha had said. This is my home now, too. Not her cabin. Not my cabin. Our home. When had that happened? When had this woman who started as a stranger become so essential to the fabric of my life? When had her presence in the rocking chair, at the kitchen table, in the small sewing room beside the main hearth become something I could not imagine being without? I did not have answers to these questions, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was falling in love with Martha Holloway. The realization terrified me. Loving Sarah had been easy, natural. We had grown up together, known each other since childhood. Our love had unfolded slowly like a flower opening to the sun. But this was different. This was like a wildfire, burning hot and fast and out of control. This was dangerous. This could destroy me, and yet I could not stop it. Did not want to stop it. Maybe Sarah had been right. Maybe it was time to stop just surviving and start really living. Maybe it was time to open my heart again. The thought carried me into sleep. For the first time in months, I did not dream of death or loss or endless winter. I dreamed of spring, of wildflowers on the hillside, of children's laughter, of hope. But hope is a fragile thing, and the winter was far from over. In the weeks that followed, life in the cabin settled into a new pattern. Martha and I were careful around each other, both of us aware of the unspoken feelings that hung in the air between us. We did not talk about what was happening. We did not need to. It was there in every glance, every accidental touch, every moment when our eyes met across the room. The children noticed too. Emma started asking questions about whether Miss Martha was going to stay forever. Thomas began including a fifth figure in his crude drawings of the family. Jacob simply assumed that Martha was his mother now, calling her mama without any prompting from anyone. Martha corrected him gently at first, but after a while she stopped correcting him. Grace grew stronger every day. She gained weight, filled out, lost the fragile look of a baby who had nearly died. Her eyes were alert and curious, tracking movement around the room. She smiled now, real smiles that lit up her whole face. Watching Martha with Grace was like watching something sacred. The way she held the baby, so tender and careful. The way she sang lullabies in a voice I never would have expected from such a practical woman. The way her whole face softened when Grace reached up to grab her finger. She loves that child, I thought, as much as any mother has ever loved any baby. And I realized that I loved watching her love Grace. That somehow in the space of a few weeks, this woman and this baby had become essential to me. Necessary, like air or water or the warmth of the fire in the hearth. It was terrifying and wonderful and completely beyond my control. One evening in late January, the children were playing a game Emma had invented. It involved rolling a wooden ball across the floor and trying to catch it before it hit the wall. Thomas was winning. Jacob was cheating enthusiastically. Even Grace, propped up against pillows on the floor, seemed to be watching with interest. Martha and I sat by the fire watching them. The scene was so domestic, so normal, that it made my heart ache. This is good. I said the words without meaning to. They just slipped out. Martha turned to look at me. What is this? I gestured at the children, at the cabin, at everything around us, all of it. I'd forgotten what this felt like. Martha was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that took my breath away. So had I. She reached out and took my hand. Her fingers were warm against mine. I had forgotten that I could feel anything but grief, that life could be more than just endurance. She squeezed my hand. Thank you for reminding me. I wanted to kiss her. The urge was overwhelming, undeniable. I wanted to pull her into my arms and hold her and never let go. But Emma was watching. Thomas was watching. Even Jacob, in his oblivious 2-year-old way, was watching. So I just squeezed her hand back. Thank you for staying. She smiled. There is nowhere else I would rather be. And in that moment, sitting by the fire with my children, playing around me, and this extraordinary woman beside me, I felt something I had not felt in 2 years. I felt happy. But happiness, like hope, is fragile. And there were forces at work that would soon test both beyond measure. The letter arrived on the 1st of February. It was delivered by a rider I did not recognize, a hard-faced man on a tired horse who handed me the envelope without a word and rode off before I could ask any questions. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the handwriting cramped and angry. Mr. Thornton, your loan payment is past due. You have until February 15th to remit the full amount of $237 plus accrued interest, or your property will be seized. There will be no extensions. There will be no negotiations. E. Blackwood, $237. The original loan had been $200. The rest was interest, calculated at rates that seemed designed to make repayment impossible. I did not have $237. I did not have $200. I did not have anything close. Martha read the letter over my shoulder. Her face went pale. We have to go to Helena. Now the weather. I do not care about the weather. If we wait, it will be too late. She was right. I knew she was right. But the thought of leaving the children, of traveling 100 miles in the dead of winter, of trusting that everything would still be here when I returned, it terrified me. I will go alone. No, Martha's voice was fierce. Blackwood might try something while you are gone. I need to be here to protect the children. I stared at her. The idea of Martha standing between my children and whatever violence Blackwood might unleash was both touching and horrifying. You cannot. Watch me. She crossed her arms. I did not survive 3 years as an army nurse by being delicate. I can handle a gun. I can handle an axe. And I can certainly handle anything Ezra Blackwood might send my way. Martha, go to Helena. Get the evidence we need. She met my eyes and there was steel in her gaze. I will keep your children safe, I promise. It was not an easy decision. Nothing in my life was easy anymore. But Martha was right. If we were going to fight Blackwood, we needed proof. And the only way to get that proof was for me to make the journey to Helena. I left at dawn the next morning. The ride to Helena took 3 days in good weather. In the depths of a Montana winter, it would take longer. Maybe 5 days. Maybe more. Every mile was a struggle against snow and ice and bone-chilling cold. But I made it, arrived in the territorial capital on the 5th day, half frozen, exhausted, but alive. Helena was a different world from Millbrook, a city of 10,000 souls built on gold and ambition. Brick buildings lined the main streets. Horse-drawn streetcars rattled past on iron rails. Well-dressed men and women hurried along the boardwalks, their breath fogging in the cold air. I found the document examiner's office in a narrow building on Last Chance Gulch. Arthur Whitmore, the sign said. Expert analysis of questioned documents. Whitmore was a small man with thick spectacles and ink-stained fingers. He listened to my story without interruption, examined my loan documents with a magnifying glass, and then sat back in his chair. You are right to be suspicious. He tapped the paper with one finger. The ink here, where the date is written, is slightly different in color from the rest of the document. It could be oxidation. Different batches of ink can change color at different rates, but it could also be forgery. Whitmore nodded. I would need to examine it more closely, run some tests. He named a figure, $40 for a full analysis and written report. I counted out the money Martha had given me, placed it on his desk. How long will it take? A week, maybe less if I prioritize it. A week. That would put us right up against Blackwood's deadline. As fast as you can, I said. Please. Whitmore pocketed the money. Come back in 5 days. I will have something for you. I spent those 5 days in Helena, waiting, pacing the streets, worrying about Martha and the children, wondering what was happening back at the cabin. I tried to send word, but there was no reliable way to get a message to Millbrook in winter. The telegraph lines did not reach that far. The mail was unreliable at best. All I could do was trust. Trust that Martha was keeping her promise. Trust that my children were safe. Trust that I would make it home in time. On the morning of the fifth day, I returned to Whitmore's office. He was waiting for me, a sheaf of papers in his hands. You were right. He handed me the papers. The date on your loan document has been altered. The ink is different. The pressure of the pen strokes is different. And there are traces of chemical erasure beneath the new writing. So it is forgery, without question. Whitmore met my eyes. Whoever changed this document was skilled, but not skilled enough. The evidence is clear. I looked at the papers in my hands, the proof I needed, the weapon I could use against Blackwood. This report, will it stand up in court? It will stand up anywhere, Whitmore said. I have testified before judges in 3 territories. My analysis has never been successfully challenged. I gripped his hand. Thank you. Good luck, Thornton, Whitmore said. You are going to need it. I rode out of Helena within the hour, pushing my horse as hard as I dared. Every minute counted now. Every mile brought me closer to home, closer to the confrontation that I knew was coming. I did not know what I would find when I got there. Did not know if Blackwood had made his move, if Martha had been able to keep the children safe, if everything I loved would still be waiting for me. All I could do was ride and pray and hope. The winter stretched out before me, endless and white and full of danger. But somewhere ahead, a cabin waited. A fire burned. A woman held a baby in her arms, singing lullabies in the darkness. My family. I was coming home to them. And God help anyone who tried to stand in my way. I returned to find the cabin still standing. That was my first thought as I crested the ridge and saw the familiar shape against the snow-covered valley. Still standing, still whole, smoke curling from the chimney like a prayer rising toward heaven. My second thought was that something was wrong. There were tracks in the snow, too many tracks. Horse prints and boot prints circling the cabin, leading to the barn and back. Someone had been here. Someone besides Martha and the children. I urged my exhausted horse forward, my hand moving instinctively to the rifle in its scabbard. 5 days of hard riding had left me bone-tired, but fear burned that exhaustion away like fire through dry grass. The door opened before I reached it. Martha stood in the doorway, Grace in her arms, her face a mixture of relief and something darker. Thank God. She stepped aside to let me pass. I was starting to worry. What happened? She did not answer right away. Instead, she turned and walked to the kitchen table, where a piece of paper lay like an accusation against the worn wood. I picked it up, read the words scrawled in an angry hand. This is your last warning. Get out or burn out. There was no signature. There did not need to be. When did this arrive? 3 nights ago. Martha's voice was steady, but I could hear the strain beneath it. Someone nailed it to the barn door. I found it when I went out to feed the animals. Did you see who? No, but I heard horses, more than one. I stayed inside with the rifle ready, but they did not approach the cabin. She paused. They killed 2 of our chickens, left them hanging from the fence. I felt the rage building in my chest, hot and dark and dangerous. Blackwood. This had his fingerprints all over it. The threats, the intimidation, the slow escalation of violence. Where are the children? In the back room, Emma wanted to stand and watch with me, but I made her stay with her brothers. She has been afraid to sleep since it happened. I crossed to the back room and pushed open the door. All 3 children were huddled together on Emma's bed, Thomas and Jacob pressed close to their sister. Emma looked up when I entered, and I saw the fear in her eyes, the same fear I had seen when Sarah died. Daddy, her voice cracked. You came back. I sat down on the edge of the bed and gathered all 3 of them into my arms. Jacob clung to my neck. Thomas pressed his face against my chest. Emma just held on, her whole body trembling. I am here. I said it over and over, like a charm against the darkness. I am here. Nothing is going to hurt you, I promise. The bad men came, Jacob said, his voice muffled against my shoulder. Mama Martha said they were trying to scare us. Mama Martha was right. I stroked his hair. But they are gone now, and I am home. We stayed like that for a long time. The four of us tangled together on the narrow bed. Slowly, the children's trembling eased. Jacob fell asleep against my chest. Thomas's grip loosened. Even Emma seemed to relax, her death grip on my arm softening. "I am going to fix this," I whispered. "I am going to make sure no one ever threatens you again." Emma looked up at me with those two old eyes. "How?" "I have a plan." It was not much of a plan, but it was something. And something was better than nothing. I put the children to bed and returned to the main room. Martha was waiting by the fire, Grace asleep in the cradle, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and determination. "Tell me," she said. I pulled the papers from my saddlebag and spread them on the table. Whitmore confirmed it. The date on my loan documents was changed. The ink is different. The pen strokes are different. And there are traces of chemical erasure. It is forgery, Martha. Clear and undeniable forgery. She picked up the papers, scanning the technical language with quick eyes. "This is enough. It should be." I sat down heavily. "If I take this to Sheriff Garrett, he will have grounds to investigate Blackwood. Maybe even arrest him. If..." Martha looked at me, and I saw that she understood. Understood the danger of what I was proposing. Blackwood is the richest man in the valley. He has connections everywhere. Friends in the territorial government. Business partners who owe him favors. Even if Garrett wants to investigate, there is no guarantee he will be able to. So what do? I leaned back in my chair, running my hands through my hair. We do it anyway. We take this evidence to Garrett. We force Blackwood into the open. We make him fight in the daylight instead of the shadows. And if he fights back, then we fight harder. Martha was quiet for a moment. Then she reached across the table and took my hand. Together, I looked at our joined hands. At this woman who had come into my life like a storm and changed everything. Together. The next morning, I rode into Millbrook with Whitmore's report tucked inside my coat. The February air was bitter cold, but the sky was clear for the first time in days, the sun bright against the endless white of the snow-covered valley. Sheriff Garrett's office was a small building at the edge of town, unremarkable except for the iron bars on the windows. I tied my horse to the rail outside and stepped through the door. Garrett was at his desk, a cup of coffee steaming beside a stack of papers. He looked up as I entered, his weathered face creasing into something that might have been a smile. "Thornton, you look like hell. 5 days on the road in February will do that." I pulled the papers from my coat and laid them on his desk. "You asked me to get proof, here it is." Garrett picked up the papers, reading slowly. His expression did not change as he worked through Whitmore's technical analysis. But when he finished, he set the papers down and looked at me with something new in his eyes. "This is real." "It is. You are certain." I paid a licensed document examiner $40 to be certain. I leaned forward. "Blackwood forged my loan documents, Garrett. Changed the due date to force me off my land. And if he did it to me, he did it to others." Garrett was quiet for a long moment. He picked up his coffee, took a slow sip, set it down again. "I have been waiting for something like this for years," he said finally. "I knew Blackwood was dirty, knew he was stealing land from honest people. But I could never prove it. Now you can. Maybe." Garrett stood up and walked to the window. He stared out at the snow-covered street. "But you need to understand what you are asking me to do. Blackwood has powerful friends. If I move against him, I am putting everything on the line. My job, my reputation, maybe even my life. I am asking you to do what is right." Garrett turned to look at me. "What is right is not always what is safe, Thornton." No, I stood up and met his gaze. "But sometimes you have to do it anyway." The silence stretched between us. Outside, a wagon rattled past, its wheels crunching against the frozen mud. Then Garrett nodded. "All right, I will do it. But I need time. I have to contact the territorial marshal. Build a proper case. Make sure everything is in order before we move." "How much time?" "A week, maybe 2. My heart sank. The deadline is February 15th. That is only 10 days away, I know. Garrett picked up the papers. "I will work as fast as I can, but I cannot promise anything." It was not the answer I wanted, but it was the best I was going to get. "In the meantime," I said, "what do I do about Blackwood?" "He sent men to threaten my family. Left a note promising to burn us out." Garrett's expression darkened. You have proof of this. I have the note. And Martha saw the horses. That is not much, Garrett shook his head. Blackwood will deny everything. Say it was someone else. Say we are making it up, so I just wait. Wait for him to make his next move. Wait for him to hurt my family. I did not say that. Garrett met my eyes. I said you do not have enough proof for an arrest, but there are other ways to handle a man like Blackwood. What does that mean? It means that sometimes the law is not enough. Sometimes you have to stand up and fight for what is yours. He paused. I am not telling you to do anything illegal, but I am saying that a man who cannot protect his own family is not much of a man at all. I understood what he was saying, understood the message beneath the words. If Blackwood came for my family, I would have to stop him, by any means necessary. All right, I said, I understand. Good. Garrett walked me to the door. Be careful, Thornton. Blackwood is dangerous. Do not underestimate him. I will not. And Thornton, I turned back. That woman of yours, Martha Holloway. She is a good woman, strong, the kind of woman a man can build a life with. Garrett smiled, and for a moment the hard lawman disappeared, replaced by something gentler. Do not let her slip away. I nodded, found I could not speak past the sudden tightness in my throat. Then I stepped out into the cold February morning and began the long ride home. The days that followed were tense with waiting for Garrett to build his case, waiting for Blackwood to make his next move, waiting for the deadline that hung over us like a guillotine blade. Martha and I fell into a routine. During the day, we went about the business of survival, feeding the animals, repairing the damage from the winter storms, caring for the children, caring for Grace. But at night, after the children were asleep, we sat together by the fire and talked, really talked, in a way I had not talked to anyone since Sarah died. Martha told me about her life before, about growing up in Ohio, the daughter of a country doctor who taught her everything he knew about medicine before he died of typhus, about the war, the endless parade of broken bodies and shattered minds that had hardened her into the woman she was today. About Matthew, the soldier she had nursed back to health and then fallen in love with. About their years of trying for a child that never came. I told her about Sarah, about falling in love with her when we were barely more than children ourselves, about building this cabin with my own hands, dreaming of the family we would raise within its walls, about the joy of Emma's birth, Thomas's birth, the fear and hope that came with every new life, about the night Jacob was born, when joy turned to ashes and I learned that nothing in this world is permanent. We told each other our secrets and our sorrows, our hopes and our fears, and somewhere in the telling, something changed between us. It was not a sudden thing, not a lightning strike or a flash of revelation. It was more like the coming of spring, slow and gradual and inevitable. One day the ground is frozen solid, and the next there are cracks where green things push through. I loved her. I knew it now with absolute certainty. Loved her in a way that was different from how I had loved Sarah, but no less real, no less deep. And I was fairly certain she loved me too. But neither of us spoke of it. Not yet. There was too much at stake, too much uncertainty hanging over our heads. The specter of Blackwood, the approaching deadline, the knowledge that everything could fall apart at any moment. So we talked, and we waited, and we hoped. On the evening of February 8th, everything changed. The children were in bed. Martha and I sat by the fire, Grace sleeping in her cradle between us. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, pushing against the walls like a living thing. I was staring into the flames, lost in thought, when Martha spoke. Caleb. I looked up. There is something I need to tell you. Her voice was strange, tight, afraid. What is it? She was quiet for a moment, her hands twisted in her lap, a nervous gesture I had never seen from her before. I have been keeping something from you. Something I should have told you weeks ago. My heart began to beat faster. What? Martha took a deep breath. I told you I cannot have children, but I need you to truly understand what that means for us. She met my eyes and I saw tears threatening to spill over. If you marry me, there will be no sons carrying your name, no daughter with your eyes and my smile, no baby that is truly ours. I watched you with Grace these past weeks. I saw how you looked at her, how you loved her. And I realized that I could never give you that. Not ever, Martha. Let me finish. She held up a hand. I should have told you from the beginning, before you started looking at me the way you look at me. Before, she swallowed. Before I started to hope that maybe there could be something between us. I reached across the space between us and took her hands. Martha, look at me. She looked up, tears streaming down her face. I have 3 children, maybe 4, if the judge rules in our favor. I do not need more children. I need you. You do not understand. Her voice broke. You deserve a wife who can give you sons, who can help you build a legacy. I cannot. I stood up, pulling her to her feet, held her face in my hands, forcing her to meet my eyes. I do not want a wife who can give me sons. I want you. Martha Holloway, the woman who walked through a blizzard to save a dying baby. The woman who stayed when she had every reason to leave. The woman who stood between my children and danger while I was hundreds of miles away. My voice was shaking now. I love you. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you sing lullabies when you think no one is listening. I love the way Emma follows you around like a puppy and the way Thomas brings you gifts and the way Jacob calls you mama. I stopped, took a breath. I love you, Martha. All of you, just as you are. And if I never have another child for the rest of my life, it will not matter, because I will have you. She stared at me for a long moment. The tears kept falling, but something else was there now too. Something like wonder. You mean that? Every word, even knowing. She let out a sound that was half sob and half laugh. I love you too. I have loved you since the moment I walked through that door and saw you kneeling on the floor with a dying baby in your arms. I told myself it was impossible, that I was too broken, that I did not deserve. You deserve everything. I pulled her closer, we both do, and then I kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss, not the soft, tender first kiss of young lovers. It was desperate and hungry and filled with all the longing we had been hiding for weeks. She kissed me back with equal intensity, her hands fisting in my shirt, her body pressing against mine. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. Marry me. The words came out without thought, without planning, but they felt right. More right than anything I had said in years. Marry me, Martha. She laughed through her tears. You are supposed to ask. I am asking. Then yes. She kissed me again, quick and fierce. Yes, I will marry you. We stood there in the firelight, holding each other, and for one perfect moment, the world was exactly as it should be. Then Grace began to cry. Martha laughed and went to pick up the baby. I watched her, this woman who would be my wife, this unexpected gift that had come into my life on the coldest Christmas morning I had ever known. We still had Blackwood to deal with, still had the deadline hanging over our heads, still had 1,000 obstacles standing between us and the future we wanted. But in that moment, none of it mattered. We had found each other. Against all odds, through all the pain and loss and darkness, we had found each other. And that was enough. The next morning I woke before dawn. For a moment I lay still, listening to the sounds of the cabin. Grace making small noises in her cradle. The children stirring in the back room. The wind had died down during the night, and the silence outside was absolute. Then I remembered. Martha, the kiss, the proposal. I had asked her to marry me, and she had said yes. A smile spread across my face. The first genuine smile I had felt in longer than I could remember. I got up and went to the main room. Martha was already there, feeding Grace by the fire. She looked up when I entered, and her face lit up with a smile that matched my own. Good morning. Good morning. I crossed to her and kissed the top of her head. Then I kissed Grace's forehead. Then I stood there, just looking at them, these two people who had become the center of my world. I have to go into town today, I said. Check on Garrett, see if there has been any progress. Martha nodded. Be careful. Always. But I was not prepared for what I found when I reached Millbrook. The town was buzzing with activity. People stood in clusters on the boardwalks, talking in low voices. As I rode down the main street, heads turned to follow me. Something had happened. I tied my horse outside Garrett's office and pushed through the door. The sheriff was at his desk, but he was not alone. Two men in suits stood against the wall. Federal marshals by the look of them, their faces were grim. Thornton. Garrett stood up. Good. You are here. What is going on? Garrett glanced at the marshals, then back at me. We arrested Ezra Blackwood this morning. I stared at him. What? The evidence you brought? The document examiner's report? It was exactly what we needed. Garrett allowed himself a small smile. We contacted the territorial marshal in Helena. He sent these gentlemen down to assist. They have been investigating Blackwood for months. Your report was the final piece of the puzzle. I sank into a chair, my legs suddenly weak. So it is over. Not quite. One of the marshals stepped forward. Mr. Blackwood is in custody, but we need witnesses. People who can testify about his methods, his threats, his forgeries. We were hoping you might be willing. Of course, I said. Whatever you need. The marshal nodded. We will also need to interview the others. Garrett mentioned a woman, Martha Holloway. She witnessed the threats at your property. She will cooperate, I said. We both will. Good. The marshal pulled out a notebook. Let us start from the beginning. I spent the next 3 hours telling them everything. The loan, the forged documents, the destroyed fence, the dead chickens, the threatening note. The marshals wrote it all down, asking questions, clarifying details. Building their case. When it was over, I felt drained, hollow, like a vessel that had been emptied out and not yet filled back up. What happens now? I asked. Now we build a case, Garrett said. Blackwood will be transported to Helena for trial. It will take months, maybe longer. But with the evidence we have, with your testimony and the testimony of others he has wronged, we should be able to put him away for a long time. In my land, Garrett smiled, your land is safe, Thornton. The forged documents will be thrown out. The original terms of your loan will be restored. You have until April 15th to make your payment, just like you always believed. I closed my eyes, let out a breath I had not known I was holding. Thank you. Do not thank me. Garrett stood up and extended his hand. Thank that document examiner in Helena, and thank yourself. You did the hard part. You stood up and fought back. I shook his hand. What about Blackwood's men, the ones who came to my property? We are looking into it. The marshals will interview everyone connected to Blackwood. If we can identify who threatened your family, they will face justice too. I nodded. It was not everything I wanted. I wanted to find those men myself, to make them pay for the terror they had inflicted on my children. But I knew that the law had to take its course, and the law, for once, seemed to be on my side. I rode home as fast as my tired horse could carry me. Martha met me at the door, her face tight with worry. What happened? What is wrong? Nothing is wrong. I pulled her into my arms. Everything is right. Blackwood has been arrested. The land is safe. It is over, Martha. It is finally over. She pulled back to look at my face, searching for any sign that I was lying. Finding none, she let out a cry of joy and threw her arms around my neck. Thank God. Thank God. We stood there in the doorway, holding each other, as the winter sun began to set over the mountains. The children came running, drawn by the commotion, and soon we were all tangled together in one big embrace. Even Grace, in her cradle by the fire, seemed to sense the change in the air, cooing happily. Does this mean the bad men will not come back? Emma asked, her voice small. I knelt down to look her in the eye. The bad men are gone, sweetheart. They are never coming back. Promise, I promise. She threw her arms around my neck and held on tight. I felt her tears, hot against my collar, and I held her just as tightly. We were safe. Finally, after months of fear and uncertainty, we were safe. That night, after the children were in bed, Martha and I sat by the fire. Grace slept peacefully in her cradle, unaware of the drama that had unfolded around her tiny life. We should talk about the wedding, Martha said. I smiled. What about it? When? Where? Who? She ticked the items off on her fingers. We need a minister, witnesses, a dress. I reached over and took her hand. I do not care about any of that. We can get married tomorrow in our work clothes for all I care. The only thing that matters is that you are there, Martha laughed. Emma would never forgive us if we did not let her pick flowers for my hair. Then we wait for spring, when there are flowers to pick. She squeezed my hand. Spring, it seems like a lifetime away. It is only a few weeks. I lifted her hand and kissed her knuckles. We have waited this long. We can wait a little longer. She leaned over and rested her head against my shoulder. I love you, Caleb Thornton. I love you too. We sat like that until the fire burned low, watching the flames dance and listening to the wind outside. For the first time in months, the sound did not fill me with dread. It was just wind, just winter. Nothing more. The darkness was lifting. Spring was coming, and with it, a new beginning. The days that followed were some of the happiest I had known since Sarah's death. Without the constant threat of Blackwood hanging over us, life in the cabin took on a new rhythm. Martha and I worked side by side, caring for the children, tending the animals, making plans for the future. We talked about expanding the cabin, adding a room for Grace when she got older. We talked about planting a bigger garden, raising more chickens, maybe even getting a pig or two. We talked about the wedding. Emma was determined to be involved in every detail. She spent hours drawing pictures of dresses and flowers and wedding cakes, showing them to Martha with breathless enthusiasm. Thomas carved a small wooden box to hold the rings. Even Jacob contributed, presenting Martha with a bouquet of dried flowers he had found in the barn. I watched my family come together, watch the bond strengthen and deepen with each passing day. And I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Hope, real, tangible hope for the future. The circuit judge was due to arrive in Millbrook in March. We would petition him for the legal adoption of Grace, making her officially and permanently ours. Martha would become Mrs. Thornton, and our strange, cobbled-together family would be recognized by law as well as love. It was more than I had ever dared to dream. One afternoon in late February, I was working in the barn when Emma came running. Daddy, come quick. Someone is here. My heart jumped. Despite Blackwood's arrest, I could not shake the fear that his men might return. I grabbed my rifle and followed Emma to the cabin. A woman stood on the porch. Young, perhaps 20 years old, thin and worn but clean and neatly dressed. Her hands were clasped in front of her, trembling despite the thick wool gloves she wore. For a moment, I did not understand. Then the woman turned to face me, and I saw her eyes, deep blue, the exact same shade as Grace's, the same eyes that had looked on at me from the cradle every day for 2 months. Mr. Thornton, her voice shook. My name is Rebecca Shaw. I am Grace's mother, and I have come to take her back. The words hit me like a physical blow. Behind me, I heard Martha's sharp intake of breath, heard Emma's cry of denial, heard the thud of Thomas's feet as he ran to stand in front of Grace's cradle, a small soldier defending his sister. No, Emma's voice was fierce. No, you cannot have her. She is ours. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. Please, you have to understand. I did not want to leave her. I had no choice. You left her to die. Martha's voice was cold as the winter wind. You left her in the snow on the coldest night of the year. She would have died if we had not found her. I know. Rebecca was crying now, tears streaming down her cheeks. I know, and I will never forgive myself. But I was starving. My husband died on the trail west. I gave birth alone in a shed with nothing. Nothing. Her hands trembled at her sides as she spoke. I had no milk, no money, no way to keep her alive. If I had kept her, she would have died for certain. Leaving her with you was the only chance she had. I stood frozen, unable to speak, unable to move. The rifle hung forgotten at my side. This woman was Grace's mother, her real mother, the one who had carried her for 9 months, given birth to her in a cold, dark shed, made the impossible choice to leave her on a stranger's doorstep. And now she wanted her back. I have work now, Rebecca continued, her voice steadying slightly. A family in Helena. They need help with their children. I have a room of my own. Money coming in. I can take care of her. You abandoned her. Martha's voice cracked. You gave up your right to her when you left her in the snow. I gave her a chance, Rebecca shot back. I gave her the only chance I could. And I have spent every day since praying that she was safe, that someone loved her, that she did not die because of me. The two women faced each other, both crying, both fierce, both certain they were right. And I stood between them, paralyzed by a choice I could not make. She is my daughter, Rebecca said, her voice breaking. My blood, my flesh. I know I do not deserve her. I know I failed her. But she is mine. Martha turned to me, her eyes pleading. Caleb, say something, do something. But what could I say? What could I do? Rebecca was Grace's mother. By blood, by birth, by every law of God and man, we had loved Grace, cared for her, kept her alive. But we had always known somewhere in the back of our minds that this day might come, that someone might come to claim her. And now someone had. I looked at Grace, sleeping peacefully in her cradle, unaware of the storm raging around her, at her perfect little face, the face I had watched over countless nights, at the tiny hands that had gripped my finger as I fed her. I loved her as if she were my own flesh and blood. The thought of losing her was like a knife in my heart. But she was not my flesh and blood. She was Rebecca's. And Rebecca had come to take her home. What do you want us to do? I heard myself say. The words seemed to come from very far away. Rebecca wiped her eyes. I want my daughter. That is all I have ever wanted, and if we say no, then I will go to the law. Rebecca's voice hardened. I am her mother. I have rights, and I have done nothing that would make me unfit. I was poor and desperate, but I am not anymore. I can provide for her now. She was right. I knew she was right. The law would be on her side. The circuit judge would rule in her favor. We could fight, could argue, could delay. But in the end, we would lose. Martha knew it too. I could see it in her face, in the way her shoulders slumped, in the way the fight went out of her eyes. Please, Rebecca's voice softened. I am not your enemy. I am grateful. More grateful than you can ever know for what you did for her. You saved her life. You loved her when I could not. But she is my child, and I need her. The silence stretched out, broken only by Jacob's sniffles and the soft sounds of Grace stirring in her sleep. Then Martha moved. She crossed to the cradle, her steps slow and heavy, reached down and lifted Grace into her arms, held her close for a long moment, her eyes closed, her lips moving in what might have been a prayer. Then she carried the baby to Rebecca and placed her in the other woman's arms. She needs to eat every 2 hours. Martha's voice was mechanical, lifeless. She likes to be sung to. Her favorite is the one about the mockingbird. Her voice broke. She could not continue. Rebecca held Grace awkwardly, unpracticed but determined. The baby fussed for a moment, then settled against her mother's chest. Thank you, Rebecca whispered. Thank you for loving her, for keeping her safe. Martha made a sound like something breaking. Then she turned and ran from the cabin, out into the snow, away from everything. I wanted to go after her, wanted to hold her and comfort her and tell her everything would be all right. But I could not move, could not speak, could not do anything but stand there as the woman who had given us Grace took her away. Sheriff Garrett arrived minutes later, as if summoned by the crisis. He looked at Rebecca, at Grace, at me. The baby belongs with her blood mother, he said not unkindly. Unless there is evidence she is unfit, I do not see. He examined Rebecca, thin but clean, sober, her eyes desperate but clear. I do not see unfitness, he said. I see a young mother who made a hard choice and came back when she could. Please. Emma tugged at the sheriff's coat. Please do not take Grace away. She is ours. We love her. Garrett's face softened, but his voice stayed firm. Love does not change the law, sweetheart. Rebecca held Grace for a moment longer. Then she looked at me. The note I left. It said you were a good father. I meant it. She paused. I am sorry for the pain this causes, but she is my daughter, and I have to try. She walked to the door, Grace in her arms, paused on the threshold. I will tell her about you, about what you did for her. She will know she was loved. Then she was gone, out into the snow, out of our lives. The door closed behind her. Silence crashed down. Emma crumpled to the floor, sobbing. Thomas sat by the empty cradle, his face blank with shock. Jacob clung to my leg, crying for Martha and the baby, and I stood there, frozen, as everything we had built fell apart around me. That night was the longest of my life. Martha did not come back. I left food on her cabin porch. It sat untouched. I knocked on her door. No answer. I called her name. Silence. My children were ghosts. Emma lay in the sewing room, clutching the blanket Grace had used. Thomas would not speak, Jacob asked for Martha and the baby until he cried himself to sleep. I sat by the empty cradle and faced the truth. I had failed to protect my family from loss, failed to act when it mattered, failed to claim what I loved before it was too late, just like I had failed Sarah. The pattern repeated, loss and failure, over and over. Maybe I was not meant for happiness. Maybe survival was all I got. The fire burned low. The cabin grew cold. Outside, winter settled back in, patient and cruel. 3 days passed. Martha stayed in her cabin, invisible, unreachable. I left food on her porch each morning. By evening, it sat untouched, frozen. I knocked, called through the door, heard nothing. My children moved through the cabin like shadows. No laughter, no play. The joy that had filled our home just days before had vanished, replaced by a grief so heavy it was hard to breathe. On the third night, I sat by the fire, staring into the flames. The empty cradle sat beside me, a monument to everything we had lost. I could not do this, could not watch my family fall apart, could not let Martha destroy herself in that cabin. But what could I do? Grace was gone, the wall had spoken, everything had changed. Daddy, I looked up. Emma stood in the doorway, her face pale in the firelight. Are you going to let Miss Martha be alone forever? She wants to be alone. No, Emma's voice was fierce. She thinks she has to be alone. Like you did after Mama died. The words hit me like a blow. You stopped smiling for a whole year, Emma continued. You stopped singing to us. You stopped telling stories. You were here, but you were not really here. She moved closer. Then Miss Martha came and you came back. You smiled again. You sang again. She reached out and took my hand. Now she is drowning in sadness, and you are letting her. Just like you almost let yourself drown. I stared at my daughter, 7 years old, but in this moment she seemed ancient, wise beyond her years. What do I do? Go get her, Emma said simply. Tell her we need her. Tell her you love her. She already knows that. Then tell her again. Emma squeezed my hand. Mama told me once, before she died, she said that love is not about avoiding pain. It is about choosing to feel it anyway. Choosing to be brave even when you are scared. The words struck me like lightning. I had spoken those same words to Martha just weeks ago, never knowing that Sarah had also shared them with our daughter. It was as if Sarah herself was reaching across death to push me forward, to tell me that it was time to stop hiding. I closed my eyes, remembered Sarah saying those exact words years ago when I was afraid to ask her to marry me. Choose to be brave, Sarah had said. The worst that can happen is she says no, but the best that can happen is a whole lifetime of happiness. I had chosen bravery then, and Sarah had said yes. Maybe it was time to choose bravery again. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and headed for the door. Where are you going? Thomas asked, appearing from the shadows. To bring Martha home. Emma smiled. Good. I stepped out into the snow. The path between our cabins was worn deep by months of footsteps. Martha's footsteps and mine, walking back and forth through winter storms and clear nights. I followed it now, my boots crunching against the frozen crust. Her cabin was dark. No smoke rose from the chimney. For a terrible moment, I thought she might be gone. Dead. Lost to the cold and the grief. Then I saw the faint glow of a candle through the window. She was alive. Still here. Still fighting. I climbed the steps to her porch and knocked on the door. Martha, I know you can hear me. Silence. I knocked again. I am not leaving. Not this time. Not ever again. More silence, then faintly I heard movement inside. Go away, Caleb. No. There is nothing you can say. Nothing that will fix this. I leaned my forehead against the door. You are right. I cannot fix this. I cannot bring Grace back. I cannot undo what happened. But I can tell you that I love you. That my children love you. That we need you. You do not need me. Her voice broke. You need someone who can give you things I cannot give. Someone who is not broken. Everyone is broken, I said. The whole world is broken. But that does not mean we have to face it alone. Silence. I pressed my palm flat against the wood. Marry me, Martha, not because of Grace, not because of the children, because I love you, because I want to spend whatever time I have left on this earth with you by my side. I heard her crying on the other side of the door. Quiet, muffled sobs that tore at my heart. I cannot give you children. I do not need more children. I need you. What if I fail you? What if I am not enough? Then we fail together. Then we pick up the pieces and try again. That is what families do. The silence stretched out. The wind picked up, blowing snow across the porch. Then the door opened. Martha stood there, her face ravaged by grief, her eyes red and swollen. But she was there, standing in front of me, alive. You mean it. Her voice was barely a whisper. Every word, even after everything, especially after everything. She let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. I love you too, God help me. I love you too. I pulled her into my arms. She came willingly, melting against me, her whole body shaking with the force of her tears. We stood there in the doorway, holding each other, as the winter wind howled around us. Two broken people, clinging to each other in the darkness. But together we were stronger than the sum of our parts. Together we could face anything, even this, especially this. Behind us, the door to my cabin opened. Three small figures tumbled out into the snow, running toward us. Emma reached us first, throwing her arms around both of us. Thomas followed, his face wet with tears. Jacob wrapped himself around Martha's leg and refused to let go. She is coming home, Emma asked. I looked at Martha. Are you? Martha knelt down and gathered all three children into her arms. I am home, she said. I am right where I belong. We walked back to the cabin together, the five of us. The wind died down, the stars came out, and somewhere in the distance a wolf howled at the moon. The road ahead would not be easy. Grace was gone, and the grief of that loss would take time to heal. Blackwood's trial was still pending. The winter was far from over. But we had each other. We had love. We had hope. And in the end, that was enough. Spring came slowly to the Bitterroot Valley that year. The snow melted in patches, revealing brown earth that had been hidden for months. The first green shoots pushed through the mud. Birds returned from their winter migrations, filling the air with songs we had almost forgotten. We were married on the 15th of March, 1887. Pastor Hayes performed the ceremony in our cabin, with Sheriff Garrett and his wife as witnesses. Emma stood beside Martha, holding a bouquet of the first wildflowers of spring. Thomas carried the rings in the wooden box he had carved himself. Jacob sat on my shoulders, announcing to everyone that Mama Martha was now Mama Martha Thornton. It was not a grand wedding. There was no church filled with guests, no elaborate feast, no fancy dress imported from back east. Martha wore a simple blue dress that brought out the warmth in her eyes. I wore my cleanest shirt and the tie Sarah had given me years ago. But it was perfect, because she was there, because we were together, because against all odds, we had found our way to each other. That night, after the children were asleep, Martha and I sat by the fire. She leaned against my shoulder, her hand in mine, watching the flames dance. I never thought I would have this again. I said quietly, a family, a home, someone to share it with. Martha squeezed my hand, neither did I. She paused. Life has a way of surprising us, of giving us gifts when we least expect them. Like Grace. The name still hurt to say, would probably always hurt. Like Grace, Martha agreed. And like you, like Emma and Thomas and Jacob, like this cabin and this valley and this second chance we have been given. She turned to look at me, and there was something in her eyes, something soft and wondering and afraid. Caleb, there's something I need to tell you. My heart clenched. The last time she had said those words, she had told me about her inability to have children. What is it? Martha took my hand and placed it on her belly. I do not understand it. The doctor in St. Louis said it was impossible, but I have not bled in 2 months, and I feel, she swallowed. I feel different, the way I felt when Matthew and I were first trying, before we knew. I stared at her. The words did not make sense. Could not make sense. You mean, I think I am pregnant. The world stopped. The fire crackled. The wind whispered against the windows. And somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled at the moon. But I heard none of it. All I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. How? I do not know. Martha's eyes filled with tears. The doctor said the grief had damaged me, that my body had shut down that part of itself. But maybe. She pressed my hand harder against her belly. Maybe it was not permanent. Maybe I just needed time, and hope, and love. I pulled her into my arms and held her as tightly as I dared. A baby, our baby, a child that would be hers and mine, born of the love we had found in the darkest winter of our lives. It seemed impossible, a miracle, grace upon grace, piling up until I could barely breathe under the weight of it. "Are you happy?" Martha whispered against my chest. I could not speak, could not find words big enough to contain what I was feeling. So I just held her and let my tears fall into her hair and trusted that she would understand. She did. She always did. The baby came in December of that year, exactly 1 year after I had found Grace on my doorstep. A boy, strong and healthy, with Martha's dark hair and my gray eyes. We named him William after my father, but Emma immediately started calling him Will, and the name stuck. Christmas of 1887 was unlike any Christmas I had ever known. The cabin was full of noise and laughter. Emma was 8 now, old enough to help with the cooking. Thomas was 6, still quiet but no longer withdrawn, his wooden carvings growing more intricate by the day. Jacob was 3, loud and wild and constantly underfoot. And Will was 2 weeks old, sleeping in the cradle I had made for Sarah, the one with the star carved into the headboard. Martha moved through the chaos like a conductor leading an orchestra. She had grown into her role as mother with a naturalness that surprised us both. The woman who had once believed she would never have children now had 4 of them, and she loved each one as fiercely as any mother ever had. I was standing by the window watching the snow fall when I heard hoofbeats outside. A rider was approaching, a woman wrapped in a heavy coat, her face hidden by a scarf. My hand moved instinctively to the rifle by the door. We had not had trouble since Blackwood's conviction, but old habits died hard. Then the woman pulled down her scarf, and I saw her face. Rebecca Shaw. My blood ran cold. She dismounted and walked toward the cabin, her steps slow and hesitant. In her arms, she carried a bundle. A child, a little girl with blonde curls and blue eyes, about 1 year old. Grace. I opened the door before she could knock. "Mr. Thornton." Rebecca's voice was quiet, uncertain. "I hope you do not mind." I needed to. She trailed off, unable to finish. Martha appeared beside me. Her face went pale when she saw the baby in Rebecca's arms. Grace. The little girl turned at the sound of her name. She looked at Martha with those blue eyes, and something flickered across her face. Recognition, perhaps, or memory, or something deeper that none of us could name. "She is beautiful," Martha whispered. "She has grown so much." Rebecca nodded. "She is walking now, starting to talk." She looked down at her daughter with an expression of fierce, protective love. "She is everything to me." "Then why are you here?" The question came out harsher than I intended, but I could not help it. This woman had taken Grace from us, had ripped our family apart, and now she was standing on our doorstep as if nothing had happened. Rebecca flinched, but she did not back away. "I came to thank you," she said quietly, "and to apologize for the pain I caused." "You already thanked us when you took her." "I know." Rebecca met my eyes and I saw tears streaming down her face. "But I did not do it right. I did not explain. I was so scared, so desperate to get her back, that I did not think about what it would do to you, to your family." She looked past me into the cabin. Her eyes found the children gathered around the tree, the baby sleeping in his cradle, the warmth and love that filled every corner of our home. "You gave her life," Rebecca said. "You saved her when I could not. And I took her away without even saying a proper goodbye, without letting your children say goodbye." She held Grace out toward me. "I want her to know you, to know the people who loved her first, to understand that she has 2 families, not just one." I stared at the little girl in her mother's arms, at the face I had memorized during those short weeks we had together, at the eyes that still haunted my dreams. I did not know what to say, did not know what to feel. Then Martha stepped forward. "Come inside." Her voice was steady, but I could hear the emotion beneath it. "It is cold out there, and we have plenty of food." Rebecca hesitated. "Are you sure?" Martha nodded. Grace is family. She always will be. And family is welcome in this house. She reached out and took Rebecca's hand, guiding her across the threshold. I watched them go, these two women who had both loved the same child, who had both sacrificed for her in different ways, who had both been broken by her loss and healed by her presence. Emma appeared at my side. Is that Grace? Her voice was small, hopeful, afraid. Yes. Is she staying? I looked at my daughter, at the hope in her eyes, at the fear of another loss. She is visiting, I said, with her mother. Emma nodded slowly, then she took my hand and led me inside. The next few hours were strange and wonderful and painful all at once. Grace did not remember us, of course. She was too young when she left. But she responded to the warmth of our cabin, the laughter of the children, the gentle touch of Martha's hands. She let Emma hold her. Let Thomas show her his wooden animals. Let Jacob babble at her in his 3-year-old way. And she let me lift her up and hold her against my chest, the way I had held her on that first Christmas morning when she was dying in my arms. She was a mama, healthy, loved. That was all that mattered. When Rebecca finally rose to leave, the sun was setting over the mountains. The snow had stopped. The world was quiet and still and full of peace. Thank you, Rebecca said, for letting us come, for being so kind. You raised her well, Martha replied. I can see how much she loves you. She loves you too. Rebecca looked at each of us in turn. She may not remember, but somewhere inside her, she knows. She knows she was loved by all of you. She bundled Grace back into her coat, preparing for the journey home. We live in Helena now, she said. It is not far. Maybe. She hesitated. Maybe we could visit again, if you would like. We would like that very much, I said. And I meant it. The wound of losing Grace would never fully heal, but seeing her alive and happy and loved, it was enough. It had to be enough. Rebecca mounted her horse, Grace secure in her arms. She looked back at us one last time. Merry Christmas, she said. Merry Christmas. We replied. Then she rode away, disappearing into the twilight. We stood in the doorway, watching until she was out of sight. Martha leaned against my shoulder. Emma held my hand. Thomas stood quietly beside us. Jacob had already run back inside to play with his new toys, and Will slept on, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded around him. Are you all right? Martha asked quietly. I thought about the question. Really thought about it. Yes, I said finally. I think I am. And for the first time in a long time, it was true. Now I am 68 years old. It is December of 1919, and I am sitting in this same cabin, surrounded by more family than I ever dreamed possible. Martha sits beside me, her hair white now, her face lined with age but still beautiful. Still the strongest woman I have ever known. We have been married for 32 years, and I love her more today than I did on our wedding day. Our children have grown and scattered and returned. Emma is 40 now, with 3 children of her own. Thomas is 38, a carpenter like his father, with hands that can coax beauty from raw wood. Jacob is 35, bold and loud and full of life, with a wife who somehow keeps him in line, and 2 boys who are just like him. And Will, our miracle child. He is 32 years old, a doctor in Helena, saving lives the way his mother taught him. He has Sarah's kindness and Martha's strength and something entirely his own. Grace came back to us in her way. She visits every Christmas now with her own husband and her own children. Rebecca passed away 5 years ago, and Grace has honored both her mothers by keeping the connection alive. Her children call Martha grandmother, and the word never fails to bring tears to Martha's eyes. We are 23 people now, gathered around the fire on Christmas Eve. 3 generations of Thorntons, plus the ones who married in, and the ones who were found on doorsteps, and the ones who simply showed up and never left. The cabin has grown over the years. We added rooms and porches and a second story. But the heart of it is still the same. The fireplace where I warmed a dying baby. The rocking chair where Martha sat with Grace in her arms. The cradle with the star carved into the headboard, now holding the newest member of our family, Emma's granddaughter, born just 3 weeks ago. Grandpa. I look up. It is Will's oldest, a boy of 10 with his father's serious eyes. Tell us the story again. The one about how you found Grace. I smile. I have told this story 100 times. 1,000, but it never gets old. I look at Martha. She nods, her eyes bright with memory. And I begin. 33 years ago, on the coldest Christmas morning that Montana had ever witnessed, I found a dying baby on my doorstep. The decision I made in the 10 minutes that followed changed everything. The children gather around, even the ones who have heard it before. The adults lean in, remembering their own parts in the story, and outside, the snow falls soft and steady, just as it did on that first Christmas morning. This is the story of grace, the story of how a broken man learned to love again, the story of a family built not from blood, but from choice. It is a story of loss and hope, of darkness and light, of the gifts that come to us when we least expect them. And it is my story, the best story I know. Because in the end, we are all just looking for the same thing: someone to love us back, a place to call home. I found all of that on a Christmas morning in a basket on my porch, wrapped in frost and desperation and the faintest whisper of hope. Grace, it was not just a name. It was a promise, a blessing, a gift from God or fate or whatever force moves through this world. And I have spent every day since trying to be worthy of it. Martha squeezes my hand. Our eyes meet across 32 years of marriage, 33 years of love. Some stories have happy endings. This is one of them.